Okay, I think we're ready to start.
Okay, good evening everybody, and today we are going to speak about David Harvey, one of the most prominent and most cited scientists in the past century. David Harvey became a Marxist in the early 70s when Marxism started to be interested in urban research. So it was a new challenge for Marxism, and David Harvey, as a geographist, was among the very first scholars who understood the big potential of the new trend. So what connects capitalism and urbanization in terms of time and space? What connects a relationship in capitalistic society and
development of the modern city? So David Harvey was not only able to respond to a new challenge, but did brilliant. His spatial analysis of urbanization, from Marxism, from point of view of Marxism, influenced many scholars and scientists. So I believe, like today's speaker, Michal, will provide a very deep insight in this program. So let's start.
Thanks. I based my presentation on this book. This is David Harvey, a critical reader, and this is a compilation of the texts which analyze different aspects of his writing, because his writings are very broad, and the geography and Marxism is just part of it. I prepared this interactive material, so you can just pass it around. Let's say that will be a little map, because we're going to talk about geography, right? So it's going to be a little map that will help us to navigate through the set of problems. I selected those concepts to kind of organize our discussion. First, I should say a couple words about Harvey himself. And as it was mentioned, that his background is geography, and this is interesting because mostly people who are doing Marxism, they are philosophers or sociologists or economists, and he's a geographer, and that influenced him deeply, and his perspective on Marxism. He wrote his PhD on as I remember, I think Kent County in England. So it wasn't related to Marx at all. And then what is very characteristic to his writing is that he went to Marxism directly, in terms that he didn't base his conclusions or his analysis on anybody else. He just took Das Kapital and started reading it. And in 1970, I think, he went to the course, which was simply a reading of Kapital, and that was he's got his inspiration. And after that, he started reading it himself and trying to apply all those materials into his project. And on the beginning, he was very interested in some sort of methodological problems of geography, and we don't go into it because it doesn't make sense now. And later on, he went into more active approach, and he moved to. He's an English guy, but then he moved to United States, to Baltimore, and then he started doing some activism, and it was in 1969, I believe. So what is very important to remember that the Harvey went to Marx straight ahead. So that was his source, Marx himself. And it sounds a little abstract that how Marxism can be combined with geography, but actually, I will try to present that. It's very simple and very interesting. And my personal inspiration for this presentation was, let's say, a big thesis that the space is not innocent, and this is the most general one. But if we think about this, that's what we see around us, and let me make it clear. I don't mean physical space in terms of cosmos or I try to avoid this philosophical speculations on nature of space, rather as abstract entity or relation between objects. No, what I mean about the space is the kind of spatial arrangement of space. That how we produce the space. That's what we see around us seems to be innocent in terms that it's natural. It's been there. We just interact with it, but it's given to us. But actually, this is the outcome of some processes which been going on. And the Marxist critics, they offer the analysis of space and spatiality from the point of view of Marxist critics of capitalism. And I try to base my presentation on Harvey, but I will go a little broader, because this famous phrase of the book "Production of Space" and the conclusion that the space is being produced is Harvey Lefebvre. He wrote this book in the 70s. So Harvey is not the only one thinker who was involved into this. As it was mentioned, in the 70s there was a kind of big boom for this kind of analysis and a huge development of urban sociology. But okay, let me get into this circle, okay? Overaccumulation and crisis, and then I should say a few broad insights about capitalism as a system, okay, and how Harvey and others analyze it, and how is it related to space. Namely, capital is to run is based on growth, and as Harvey said, 3% per year, forever. I mean, if we understand what does it mean, 3% per year forever. Okay, this is the progress which will never stop. And as it was possible in 19th century when it was developing, it is simply impossible right now, because it means that everyone wants to make a profit of 3% per year. So the consequences of it is a crisis, and this is called internal contradiction of capital accumulation. That's in a fancy term, but what it means is that accumulation, as Harvey said, accumulation for accumulation's sake will lead to the crisis. That you have money and you spend this money to make more money, and this more money you invest in order to make even more money. So how does it work specially? There are two ways to make a profit. You reduce your costs, or you sell, or you find new market. Okay, those are the main big kind of ways to increase your profits. And how can you lower your costs? You can imply new technologies, or you can find people who will work for less money. And what is the consequence for the geography in this context is that the capitalists, I'm using the language of Harvey and Marx, capitalists will look for places which promise new market or promise new labor forces, cheap labor forces. And this is the first, let's say, big insight of Harvey. And also Marx said himself that the capital is looking for overcoming the barriers. If you have any obstacle, the capital will overcome it or overpass it and just keep expanding. So the geographical expansion of capital is included in the system. It will always look for new markets and always for cheaper production. And how is it related to crisis? Overaccumulation means that there are too many in the system. And what does it mean? Let's say you have new technology in your factory. You apply new technology, then you don't need so many people to work for you. So then you fire them. But then those people, they don't have money. They cannot buy the product you produce, right? So that's the problem of that you want to make a profit by cutting costs, but you cannot sell your product. So what do you do then? You can find a new market, right? Or you can move the production. And the production is very interesting. It's called the other guy called I believe Williams. He coined the term nomadic capital. Nomadic capital. That the capital comes and goes. It means that geographically the surface of the earth is evaluated in accordance to only very few categories, which is how this or that place can generate profit, how this or that place can be friendly or unfriendly for a production. Can this place or the local community offer a cheap labor supplies, or let's say friendly to production environmental regulations. So what does it mean? That the capital overcomes spatial barriers. That, let's say, there is a place which attracted capital for some reason, and then the factory is established, and then people get job there, and everyone is happy for some time. But this factory can move to the other place quickly, in terms that if basically the labor forces, people who work in the factory, on the beginning they will be happy to work for $3 a day, but then after some time they will try to organize themselves and have an influence on their work conditions. And the capitalists, they don't like it, because it increased their costs of production. So they always have this threat that saying that, okay, if you push us too much, then we move factory to some other place. So people stay calm. Or other factor is the environment. If the local policy is very friendly for production, let's say you can dump your chemical waste, or you don't need to worry having, eco-oriented groups by the gate, then you keep production there. If you have some obstacles, then what do? You just leave it. You leave this place because you are backed by the financial institutions, and you have a capital to move it, to move everything, move the whole factory through the half of the globe, because you found a more friendly place to produce what you produce. So, but for local people, this is devastating, because it changed the local structure. Then suddenly you have thousands of people without job, because all of them were working in this factory. And that's another thing is about the nomadic capital, that this overaccumulation, this too much money in the system, is must be sort of wasted or invested. Invested that you establish production in other areas. But here I need to remark something very important, that most of the critics of this argument says that, okay, if you let capitalists have the money, then they will open factory and create workplaces for people, and everyone can enjoy better life conditions. But in fact, as Harvey said, that now people, they don't invest in production anymore, because production is very risky. It's very competitive. Remember, 3% growth. Everyone wants to achieve it. Wants to achieve 3% of growth. So everyone tries to be the best. Okay, it's very hard to be in the market. So if you have some money to invest, then you don't invest in production. You don't create new workplaces. You invest in assets, which means you buy gold, you play on the stock market. You make money out of money. You go into financial speculations, which creates nothing. Okay? And then sometimes you have the situations where there are some affluent people who's got profits and invest in the stock market, and the stock market goes up. And then you can see that, yeah, we are doing great. Stock market is going up, everything is great. But this is not the real representation of what is going on. Because those people who have no access to the stock market, they are losing, okay? And this is majority. Okay, this is just a remark. Other things, space-time compression. It means that thanks to technologies, the problem of space doesn't exist anymore. This is metaphor, okay? But actually, now there is only a question about time. For instance, you can get everything everywhere. It's just a matter of time, and this time is acceptable, okay? In terms that you can get things on the other side of the globe in 2 days, okay? So this is not a question about the space. It's only the time factor. That's what he means by space-time compression, okay? Or as Marx pointed out, annihilation space through time. Spatial fix, another term. This is related, and I'm approaching to the second main category, the city. The first one will be capital and the space. The second is the city, and they are very closely related in terms that the spatial fix is something that this over accumulation, the surplus of capital, is invested spatially. In order to save the system, okay? Because if you have too money in the system, it will cause the crisis. So then you invest the money to develop some areas, and which means that it's not only about the production. You don't only develop your factories or the production of your goods. It's also you invest in, let's say, this is related to city, in urbanization, okay? And so you produce a space, and this very particular sort of space is closely subjugated to the set of principles, which means that you invest in something under condition that you have this capital to invest to generate even more capital. Okay, so that's the main principle, which means that in the context of the city, that the city is developing not for the wealth for everybody. It's just for well-being of few affluent people or groups who can achieve investments. And the rest of people are just left alone, and they might just observe that city is changing, but they have no influence on it. They have no influence on the decision process and planning process. This is up to developers. And the developers are in close relation with the financial institutions. So that's how it works. In the context of city, what is interesting is so-called suburbanization. And that could be discussed in the context of the United States in 50s, 60s, 70s. It was the period of a great time for the capital accumulation. Why? Because after the Second World War, the whole industry was in heat. Okay, it was producing a lot. But then the war was over, and then what can you do? You cannot slow it down, because you need to generate the profit all the time. So then you need to sell goods to people, but you need to make them want to buy it. And that's, as Harvey says, that's how this American dream was created. American dream of consumption and basically one supported model of life. Having a own house, 2 cars, okay, and yard, all of those things was, according to him, was ideologically through mass media created to make people become consumer and consume this of this surplus of goods, which are a result of working industry on a really high level. And another thing which really I find it really interesting, home ownership, which in the United States this is a cultural value, as Harvey says. This is very important. 68% of people own houses. And this is also the part of this American dream, but it also has another consequence that is about the mortgage, right? Harvey says simply, when you have mortgage, you don't go on strike, okay? You don't protest, because you might lose your job. When you lose your job, then the bank will take your house. You are easy to be controlled, okay? So this American dream has also this very oppressive, I would say, side of it that keeps people down. And this is also related to land speculations, and coming back to those remarks that if you have people who have no money to buy your goods, what do you do then, right? If you have some technologies that you can produce things without those workers, you don't want to have them back. You try to find a way to make them buy your things. So then what can you give them? You can give them credit cards, right? And they buy and they go into debt. And that's how, as Harvey says, the crisis started, the last one. I mean, he says that since 70s we had, I don't remember how many, 15 or 17 crises going on. And he said the crisis is always there. It's always there. It's only moved spatially, geographically. As he gave this example, he said, oh, now United States is doing better and better, but then you have Greece fall down, or do you have other places fall down? You don't see it in mass media, but the crisis is always there. Okay, it's internal, internally included in the system. So when you have credit cards and indebtedness, then there is a point where the bank will ask for the money, right? And then the people cannot pay. They cannot buy anything. They cannot pay for their own house. They cannot buy any other things. And then the crisis starts. Okay? As he analyzes, he's very devoted. Some of his books are full of numbers, but so it gives the impression that he's really into it. But what he's let me think what he said about another thing. Okay, Next bubble, gentrification. That's what I mentioned before. This is the situation where you have the area in the city, and for some reason this is attractive, or somebody decided that you're gonna place a business there, okay? And then what happens? That the developers start investing money, building up nice-looking houses to locate the offices, okay, and headquarters of the companies. But then the land price goes up, so people who live there, they cannot afford living there, and they are left alone. They need to move out. And that's the process of gentrification, basically. And again, this is related to this very principle of making profit. So the land is closely associated with its potential of, or promise of making a profit for some group of people. And the other people cannot compete with this, because how can you compete with financial institutions? Okay. Now there's interesting example of reshaping the city. The most famous one is the Baron Haussmann in 19th century Paris. Harvey was living in Paris for a year, and he went there to study Marxism or something. But then he found interesting that Paris is a very interesting city itself. So he was studying this huge change in infrastructure and urban tissue, as they say in Chicago school, like in the 30s. That Haussmann was a guy who had the plans to rebuild Paris downtown, but he did it in the scale which was unprecedented in history. And why? Because he's got a lot of money from the financial institutions, and also huge credits. It also was run with credits, and then of course he was working for the I believe Napoleon III, who was, I don't remember who was that time in Paris, but he rebuilt Paris according to the principle of promoting consolidation of the class power, which means that affluent people didn't feel safe that time in Paris, because Paris was a hot place from before. So what they decided to do is to get rid of all those little narrow streets, which were very hard to defend and very hard for the military movements. So then they decided to build up these huge boulevards through the Paris which was also related with demolishing of the huge areas. And another more contemporary example is Moses in New York, and the Manhattan. That he rebuilt Manhattan also in accordance to the principle of financial profits. That he kind of supported gentrification of whole Manhattan. That why the prices in Manhattan are incredibly high, because of the location of businesses there. And this is also doesn't include people who were living there before, and they are forced to move out. And this is a huge phenomenon. It was in the 60s. And another thing, you can see what is going on with the space in the city. The most famous example, right, is like in Brazil. You can see this discrepancy between 20% and 80%, right? You have gated communities, and you have favelas, right? And also the space is defended. If you have a piece of your land, like gated communities, you lock yourself in because you feel unsafe. So the security and the freedom is very crucial here. That in the name of security, you can isolate yourself, even within the city. You have a city within the city. And because my time is running out, the solution, right? Harvey doesn't offer any solution. He tried to point out those problems. As he said, he knows maybe the nature of the problem. He has no solution, but this is the starting point to get together and discuss those things. Because they seem to be neglected and nobody sees them. And as he, according to Lefebvre's famous article, The Right to the City, is to create some social panels and organizations that they might have influence on those developers, and they might have their own voice in the on the planning process and in shaping the city, because the people live there and they need to have some sort of influence on their own surrounding. And this is okay out of this map that some time ago I encountered one guy named, I don't remember now, but it doesn't matter. He builds houses from the waste, from the garbages, mostly from the bottles, cans, tires, and it sounds quite ridiculous, but I've seen those houses on YouTube, okay, and they look pretty nice. But what is the problem? Why I'm mentioning this guy? Because it sounds like attempt for some alternative architecture. He's an architect himself, but when he built up 1-2 houses, there was no problem. But when he established a little community, then the huge bureaucratic machine came out. And then he had to pay taxes, he had to get infrastructure, roads, water, electricity. But I need to mark here that those houses, I don't know how, but they are sustainable. They don't need anything from outside. I don't know how, really. But people were living in these houses for years. And there was a point, finally, after years of struggle, he gave up. He said, I cannot deal with those guys from the offices, you know. Then he went to Indonesia after the tsunami, and he taught those people how to build up the houses from the garbages. And then he got his fate back. He came back to the States. He wore a suit, and he went to all those offices. It took him, I don't know how long, a couple of years probably. But finally he's got the permission to establish sort of experimental settlements with those houses. What I'm telling you is that there are some alternatives that we might create the space and the urban structures in a different ways, not only in accordance to the profit and to the betterment of few. Okay, and I would conclude with this.